Hello. Hey, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Hey. Hi, Joy. Hi, Christian.
It's good to be back. It feels like it's been like a month.
84 years.
Feels like 4 weeks.
Yeah. So
Wonderful
so
to see
here
you.
we are, closing out the end of the year. Welcome everybody to Guardians of M365 Governance, episode 12, or Duolingo would have me say episode 12.
Oh, well done, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I'm almost to 1 year of daily Spanish training, and that's the quality of the accent of my Espanol.
Just wait till you get into Dallas more. You'll get that Texas accent going with it.
I am looking forward to that. My wife is already like just doing trips down there, and I come back and I have a little bit of a twang, and my wife's like, "We don't live there yet. We don't live there."
Y número 13, podemos hablar en español todo
there we go. Hey, excellent.
episodio.
Love
Para el
it.
gran tema de governance y el Microsoft 365.
Excelente. ¿Dónde está el baño? Yeah. So, all right. Well, this is a series. This is a monthly webcast focused on the rapidly evolving and expanding Microsoft 365 governance story. And our goal is to share insights, best practices, and the latest information about new governance features and capabilities within Microsoft 365. But it's dedicated to everything governance within the Microsoft ecosystem. So if you have questions or comments or thoughts on what we should cover or guests we should have on the show, please comment. And is there anything else governance related that's happened out there? Any news? It's last week was the ESPC Stockholm.
Always exciting. Exciting. But I think
what's going on.
I think this is the thing with governance, though. It's all these new tools, new features, and functionality are always popping up. But the base, the heart and soul of governance, it's really going to be content, permissions, people, training. It's a culture that has to be in place. It never gets old. We have to modernize, but the heart of it pretty much stays about the same place.
Yeah, that is just understanding where you are as an organization. Sorry,
Yeah.
Ragnar.
Yeah. I've got a huge event around Copilot and AI experience for Microsoft Munich. I will be traveling to Munich in 2 weeks and talk about governance for Copilot. So there's a lot of attention around governance for Copilot, and I'm doing this, the Copilot governance part since our Rancor days, and now I'm still continuing. So I'm just telling the same story, just under a new employer hat, actually, but the same story. A bit slides have changed, different corporate design, but the story is, as Joy just said, it's the same. And with my new role, I'm also enjoying that I'm also using and playing with other vendors' tools, and I'm very excited to see how they're making progress. But still, there are some always different.
Yep.
So I'm now very deep into all the other tools, and they are very different, and no tool is the same. Every tool has its own strengths and focus.
I recognized this back in the day working for another ISV around migration software. And when you have conversations, in fact, I had a great conversation with, years ago with Jeremy Thake, who's now at Microsoft. And while he was with AvePoint, we were at an event somewhere, and he's with AvePoint. I think at the time we had just been acquired. So I was at Metalogics. And so talking about migrations, and we go in there and people want to look at, customers often ask, well, I want to see a side-by-side, feature-by-feature comparison. I said, yeah, like the fundamental things that it does, we're accessing the same APIs, but our approach to how we do that and then other features around it are very different. And so it really does depend on your environment. And it's funny because you can have, and I'm talking about migration, but you might have a migration that fails in a certain area, and a company a customer is upset with that product and they buy another product and they're like, this is the one for me. And they have exactly the opposite experience as another because of the nuances of what they've built, how they've built that with the features that they're looking for.
Yeah.
Governance is very much the same way.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, let's jump right into, let's get our guest on stage here.
Oh, yes.
Adding to the stage, we should, since we've drug her along here, but for this 12th episode, so this is an attempt at what we tried recording earlier this fall, but welcome to Sharon Weaver, who's a Microsoft Regional Director, MVP, MCT, a bunch of other acronyms on there, and the co-founder, the CEO of Smarter Consulting, Sharon Weaver. Welcome, Sharon.
Hello.
Wonderful.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we need to have the applause sound effect. We need to build that in. Yeah. But Sharon, really quick, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your involvement around our topic today, which is getting into the maturity model.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think you nailed it with, I like to collect titles apparently. So I'm Sharon, I'm an overachiever. I've been in tech for, I believe next year I'll be getting paid to be in technology for 30 years. So I've been doing it for a really long time. And before that, it was kind of a hobby. So I've been doing it as long as I can remember. And one of the biggest things, what's real interesting about what ties into this is that I've always been that person that's been really detail oriented. And so it's like, why doesn't this work? Or why doesn't that work? Or how can I make sure the right person has the right access to the right thing? And so I've spent a lot of time in everything from data architecture to permissions to governance and access management. And so it kind of like just led into this career of really helping people use their tools the right way. And so now I actually have been, I don't even know how long it's been, a couple of years. I think I've been helping the Microsoft Maturity Model team build competencies. We run a monthly webinar like this where we basically talk about different competencies, different topics, and we also build out the content out on Learn. So if you go out on Learn and you search for the maturity model for Microsoft 365, there are just tons and tons of tools out there for self-assessment workshops and then all the competency information around the maturity model. And all of that was built on the lean maturity model. And I'm a Six Sigma black belt. And it's really important for me to understand how to be successful and eliminate inefficiencies and things like that. So it's all built with that in mind.
Yeah, I know you've been involved for a couple of years. It's one of those things where those monthly community calls always were in conflict with standing, recurring other calls. And there's always a lot going on in the mornings, especially as we're all fellow MVPs. We're on a lot of those NDA only calls, the product teams, and they always seem to pick the same times that conflict with everything else that's happening in the community that's out there. But a couple times when I've been able to drop in have been deep dives into one or two areas, competency areas within the overall maturity model. But maybe, what's your pitch for why should people be familiar with the maturity model, the Microsoft 365 maturity model specifically?
And just so you guys know, if you ever miss it, it is recorded and it's posted on YouTube with all the other PMP videos. So if you miss it, just pop out there. And sometimes I watch things on 2X and 3X just so I can get the meat of it. But so I think the most important thing, and as I own a consulting services company. So people come to us when their hair's on fire. That's what they do. They're like, we're having problems. We need help. And so that's what they come to us for. And I think what's important about understanding the maturity model and why it matters is because you want to know, how do I go from here to here? And the maturity model is one of the few things that I can honestly go to and say, there is a systematic approach that can tell you how to discover where you're at within the model and do a true assessment and identify these are the traits around this particular competency or business or goal and where we're at and kind of like what's happening. And over here are the things that I really want us to be able to do or achieve or get to. And there's a very clear path to go from here to here. And so the maturity model helps you identify where you're at, and also understand where you want to go and how to get there. And often people are like, I want to get here. And then they don't understand that there's all these things that have to happen between here and there. So instead of going from here to here, it's like trying to climb Mount Everest. Like, I'm just going to like jump to the top of Mount Everest. That's not how that works. You know, you can have a path to go from here to here to here to here to here to here to here in a reasonable amount of time and a reasonable set of actions.
It's one of my favorite things about, and we should make sure to post the link to like the learn.microsoft.com collection of pages about this, because there's a lot of content out there. But one of my favorite things that it does is give you keywords for the different levels that are identified. So again, I come from that consulting background, and well, how do we know where we are? Well, one of the easiest things would be to go think, what kind of words and language do you have in place now? And even just looking at those levels, what is it? It's like level 100, 200, 300, 400. Look at the words you use, how you speak, how you define your day-to-day activities, and likely you're going to be able to match with your level just with the way you talk about it. And I think that was a really brilliant addition to add those keywords in to help go, okay, where are we? Because you don't know where to go if you can't define where you are.
The other thing to remember, though, that it's not like it's this programmatic, sharply defined around the edges for each of those levels. You know, because most organizations you might go in and look at and you say, well, you know, is our goal to ever reach 500? It's like, no, there's no business reason to be there. Like, we want to improve things. We want to automate. We want things to, you know, we want to be in more control of our environment and be aware of what people are using. We need to be secure and compliant, kind of all those things. And you might look at something and say, well, we're clearly within, we know we're at 200 level, like we're achieving, like everything that we're doing fits right in with that. But there's going to be a lot of things where some of these things we're doing at a 300, some at a 400 level, maybe in a couple areas we're at that 500 level. If you go and look at the competencies, you'll see what I mean. But like around communication, you might be really strong in communication, but then failing on other areas, you know, security and compliance and kind of other type of things. But we're really good at sharing information. Well, we hired somebody who went and built this the right way, and we're very mature in that area. And then there's no right or wrong. It helps you better understand, hey, we are a bit lopsided, and why we're not having the level of adoption in these other areas, because we tried to skip some steps, or we're, you know, so it's a great way to just be reflective on, you know, what are kind of the industry norms. How can we compare ourselves to where other organizations of our size in this industry are? And so it just provides those kind of data points, like saying, hey, this is generally where you are, and then what those next steps would be to go and make those improvements. So if you are looking at, especially here we are end of year, talking about next calendar year, like what are going to be our goals? How can we further improve? This will help you get a better picture of, here's some aspirational goals for us to move the organization, our operations to, so that we're getting more out of the technology that we're already paying for.
Yeah. And what are people at those levels doing, and businesses at those levels doing? I think, you know, throughout my entire career, and I speak to this professionally whenever I, you know, mentor anybody, I talk about, where do you want to go? What do you want to accomplish? Look for somebody who's doing that, and look at what do they do. And if you do what they do, you're probably likely going to have what they have, right? And I think it's the same way in the maturity model. If you look in the maturity model and you say to yourself, you know, in my business, these are our business initiatives, or these are our goals for, you know, maybe next year as a leader. And this is the maturity model group, I think, is quite a bit smaller maybe than something like the developer groups. But I think a lot of that's because we have a lot of, you know, senior leadership, directors, influencers, stakeholders, you know, executive sponsors. Those are the people who are really making change in an organization. And they're like, okay, this is my job. how do I do this effectively? And they're not sure sometimes. And that's okay to say out loud as an executive leader, I don't know what I'm doing. And so to have a system like this where you can go out and say, these are the goals that I've been given in this role. These are the initiatives that my business is really trying to accomplish for the next year. I don't know what to do to get there. I think having a place like the maturity model to go and say, these are the goals that are at this level. What is it that I need to do to get there is really helpful for those roles, because otherwise all you're really doing is going out and looking at what are other businesses doing at the level I want to be, and then how can I imitate that? But this gives you a really clear path to be able to set actionable goals.
And now, Sharon, my question is which kind of drivers do you see that companies bring from one stage to the other? Is it which kind of compelling events, pains, drivers are bringing them from 100 to 200, 400 to 500, and so on? What do you usually see? What is most efficient to do this next step?
So we find, like, I would say 100 is just kind of the way of being, like, you're like, I'm just here, right? Everything's on fire. You're just kind of like figuring things out as you go. We look at 100 as kind of like the we're just starting step. I would say most places at a bare minimum are usually at a 200, right? You've got some kind of loose process. It might not be documented. It might not be going on. We find that the most pain kind of falls between the 2 and 300 levels. So 2 to 300 is when people are recognizing we do some things, we're kind of organized, but we want to be better. And so the 2 to 300, I think, is that biggest step where I see people realizing, companies realizing, if we want to go from here to here, we're going to have to make a significant investment. And what's really interesting to me is that 2 to 300 is that moment where you know that you have to get there, and you know that you have to invest. And it's kind of like that it's the jump of faith, it's that leap of faith to say, I think I can make it. And if you do everything and you kind of invest correctly and you prepare for it, it's definitely a hurdle you can overcome. But often what I find is that if people don't invest, they don't prepare properly, they slide back to 200 pretty easily. So the 2 to 300 level jump, I think, is one of the biggest jumps that people have to make. And then once you get to that 300 level, you are equipped then to choose whether or not you want to go to 400 to 500. So when I see, like, what is the consistency across everybody in terms of kind of going up and down, I would say the biggest consistency I see is that jump from 2 to 300 is not only difficult and a big investment, but it's very pivotal to most businesses in terms of, if you are willing and able to get from 2 to 300 in a competency, you are prepared now to grow to 400 and 500 if you want to.
What do you think are some of the steps or the ways an organization can start to prepare their people for these changes? I know from an IT perspective, you roll out a policy that's going to maybe keep people from being able to install whatever they want to on their work computer. We don't like having things taken away, right? So what do you think would be steps and ways companies can prepare their people for the growth and the change?
It's
and by the way,
interesting.
here I'm currently scrolling here to the website, because maybe we should spend like 3 minutes and go through the initial definition. What is actually 100, 200, and 300, 400? So maybe that's a good idea, just to summarize and see where we are here.
Yeah, there you go. So if you scroll down and look, it tells you level 100, level 200. In fact, we've got so anytime you join our calls, like, we walk through this at the beginning of every single call. And one of the things that we found, so Joy, to answer your question while he's kind of popping that up, and then we can go through some of these levels. So Simon Hudson and I did a workshop last year on the maturity model, and it was fantastic. And we did basically a workshop with a lot of people who came in and talked about kind of what their needs were. And we did an affinity diagram where basically we had all of them really identify. We identified the competencies. We identified areas where they struggle with those competencies. And what was really fascinating to us, and we found this over and over and over in other calls and meetings and things like that, is that the number one thing that you can do to be successful in the growth of your different areas is communication. And communication is the biggest possible hurdle there is. So basically what I'm saying is, if you can level up your communication competency, it makes all the other competencies easier to level up. So like I just said, if you're at a 200 and you go to 300, that's the biggest hurdle of all of the competencies to focus on to be successful across the board. We have found that communication is, first of all, the lowest competency at most organizations. So think about communication and change management kind of hand in hand. We find that that's the lowest competency in most organizations, but it has the highest impact in most organizations. So if you really want to say, what's the biggest quick win I can get? Which competency should I focus on first? My recommendation, based on factual evidence, not anecdotal evidence, factual evidence that was really kind of secured by this workshop is the communication competency.
Love it. This is where we need that applause sound again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why I brought it up. I mentioned it first because it's funny because Sharon and I have our project management show, Project Failure Files, and there's a couple of the recurring themes almost every single episode of that, and communication as being a reason for failed project management it's there every single time. It's like communication and transparency, like sharing the process, which when we talk about governance, that's why it's about, my core, my background. I've been in tech for over 30 years and started as a project manager. And a lot of that was those two things was, project managers that stand out are those that are really strong in their communication skills and they're planning around that, and then make the process very transparent. And that is so much the secret to governance as well.
Human beings don't like change for sure, unless it's our idea. We don't want to change. And we also don't like surprises, typically. Yeah. There are a few weirdos out there. All right. But yeah, so if you can tell them, this is what's coming, this is what's going to change, this is what's going to stay the same, because that can be kind of the warm, fuzzy blanket. Hey, this is going to stay the same. Get ready, and this is how we're going to help you prepare. No matter what you're doing, that can be huge. But Sharon, you got to communicate it first.
Yeah. And not just communicate, but have a plan around it, right? So a lot of people think we communicate, we tell people what's going on. We
get emails all the time.
And I think, this is where the maturity model becomes really important, because a lot of people think they're doing the right things and they mean well. Everybody has good intentions. Everybody's motivated the right way. Everybody wants to do the right thing. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's more effort than they think it is. And so by looking through those competencies, you can be like, okay, we're totally at a 400 or 500, obviously. And you pull it up and you're like, oh, we're not doing any of this stuff. And so it really does bring reality to expectations.
I was just going to bring up too that, the other aspect of this, it could feel very overwhelming, bring this back up on the page here. But when you look at, the number of competencies of the areas, and I love that, in progress here has been there for a while and in progress, but the data and analytics aspect of that. But looking across these, like where do I start, and across all these different things is, is there a programmatic way to go one through start at the list and then go through all of the different areas? Does it really depend on kind of the goals, the culture of your organization, that hey, we know we're having weaknesses in the peoples and communities, we're having adoption issues, we also search is broken, let's go look at where we are here and have goals there? Or is there a comprehensive approach to looking at all of these?
Where to start? Yeah.
Yeah.
And where are the dependencies? So what here from customers is, they're overwhelmed. They don't know where to start, and then they don't know the dependencies. So yes, we could start everywhere from A to Z, but where are the dependencies, especially around search and Copilot and Sharon.
So back so if you click on that main title, there's actually a little dashboard that shows you kind of where to start. So if you go back and click on where it says maturity model for Microsoft 365 on the left, that very top one, there's actually, there's a dashboard or the overview. Maybe it's overview. It's the very top one. There you go. So if you look on here on the far right, scroll down just a little bit tools and samples. So right there on the right-hand side, it says get started. So a lot of people have asked us this. And so this is what we put together. And this is how to run a Microsoft a maturity model workshop. And what a workshop basically states is how to figure out where you're at, what you're doing now, and what you need to be doing. And there are tools and there are steps right here to answer exactly what you guys said. We don't know what to do. We don't know where to start. We don't know what those dependencies are. We don't know what we don't know. So this literally walks you through step by step how to set your expectations, how to know where you're at. There's tools on here that you can download. There's a worksheet that you can download where you can self-identify where you're at all these places. And then that will give you the answers for what you need to focus on, what those dependencies are going to look like, what you're going to need to do to set those goals and to make those changes and to set those action items. So this is a big topic behind the scenes that we've talked about, like what to do and how to really know what you need to do so that you can get from here to there.
Yeah, and again, for folks that are, if you go and just do a search for Microsoft 365 maturity model, you'll hit the main site. And again, you can navigate over on the left side to get to the overview for this top level.
This is one of my favorite things to consult on. I've done so many assessments and reports. People come to me and say, we just don't know how to get from here to there. And I'll tell you what, if people come to me and say, what is it that you really, really like to do? I really do love to train and help people kind of get the most out of what they've got, help them understand how to be successful. But man, if there's a consulting service that is my absolute favorite, it is running an assessment and a workshop and helping people set goals to be successful.
Yeah, very cool. Well, so I know this is a lot. I've done sessions for years over the last more than a decade, specifically around maturity model. In fact, so we had one of our former guests, Melinda Morales. She and I, we used to work together. We did we kind of expanded on the original because the maturity model started with the SharePoint maturity model with Sadie Van Buren. I remember when she was presenting that at SharePoint Saturdays at different events and seeing that kind of kick off and get started. Melinda and I created the SharePoint governance maturity model. So the SBGMM. And so we did sessions together. I've got like the video of us presenting on stage in Seattle one year on that topic. And so it was interesting talking about governance 15 years ago when I left Microsoft and had governance related topics, and there'd be like 2 or 3 people in the room, and to see that expand to where go and do a larger conference and there'd be 100+ people, standing room only in a governance session. And it feels like we're kind of moving back into that realm around governance because of Copilot.
Definitely.
And
Oh, yes.
so, I mean, so one thing I know that with the categories, you're at the higher level. You're talking about with the competencies that are covered. That it doesn't make sense to maybe have an AI specific category, but is that something that people are asking for? Is that another area that the working team may put together a working group specifically looking at governance for AI?
Yeah, so this year we covered what we consider like case studies or real world use cases around the maturity model. And we feel as a team that when you talk about applying it to something like that, it's kind of more vertical. So it kind of covers all of the different competencies. And we actually did, I think we've done it twice now. We've covered Copilot and AI using the maturity model and like what are the specific things that you need to do around that. That way, when you go to look, you can say, if I'm going to implement Copilot, like what are the competencies that I need to focus on, and what are the ones that are important, and which one should I be at what levels for. And there is a governance competency. And we talked about the idea that your governance competency is going to be, need to be mature. Your communication competency is going to need to be mature. I mean, everything kind of needs to be, but when you think about, implementing something like AI, it's your underlying competencies that matter far more than anything else.
Yep.
Sharon, when I look at your article around governance, I have to apologize because I didn't bring a birthday cake to the party, because today it's the 2 years birthday, because it was published on the 31st of October, 22. Would you like to add something in the context of AI in Copilot to this article? Maybe also going to say, listen, with AI, we need to create a level 600 because we cannot squeeze it into 500 anymore. So what would you change in this 2 years birthday?
So level 600, is that when is because of AI, that's when governance becomes self-actualized and self-aware, and the governance runs itself. So that's what we aspire to. And then we just truly hands off the steering wheel and it just runs itself.
Oh, that's a wonderful topic.
No, the funny part is I don't believe that there should be a 600, because at a 500 level, not only are you really aware of your risk tolerance and implementing things the way that you should be, you're also becoming a leader in the space. So a 500 level competency business would be not only knowledgeable about that topic, but they'd also be sharing that information out as a thought leader within the industry, and setting the best practices for other businesses and becoming a business differentiator using that topic. So if I think about what would I change, I think I would make more of a comment around the idea that it is a foundational competency for something like implementing AI well, so that when you put it on there, you are just already ready to rock and roll, as opposed to adding another level to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I know that we're kind of at time here. Sorry, Ragnar, you have one last final thought here.
So Sharon, so I understand so if you want to invest more time into this article and the evolution of this website, then you're going to invest more in scenarios. So stay with the level 500, not going into 600, but spend more focus on the scenarios and in real world use cases.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of opportunity for going and doing vertical, like the application of the maturity model across the verticals, like across AI, across Power Platform would be another area that where somebody could go in and build a specialty, whether consulting or just, content, writing about it, sharing the experiences that of how, if I want to mature specifically my Power Platform practices from level 100 up to 500 level, here's a path, like a learning path for that.
Power Platform or Fabric also, that's a huge topic. Governance of Fabric. It's
lots of
what we see
opportunities
is that there's so many products involved. There is the whole storage layer, data lake layer. Then there is Power BI, which came from governance for Power Platform. So we see new products, which are, yes, they are new products, but they have so many different pieces. And when we glue all the pieces together, we need to talk about governance, because it's not a single new product. It's just a solution built of many different products.
Exactly.
And then it's obvious that if you need governance.
Yeah. Well, I know we need to cut it short. People have got meetings to go to. Thank you so much, Sharon, for joining. It's glad you can make it this time, and I'm sure we'll probably have you back when we plan on when the data and analytics section goes live. Maybe we grab like you and Simon and maybe we do a deeper dive longer around the new competency that's out there.
Yeah, that'd be great.
In the meantime, you've got our contact information down below. Of course, you can tweet, share, whatever, use the hashtag wherever it is that you're doing those things these days. And with that, we'll be back in January. We already have our guest aligned. We got to make sure it happens. We won't say any names just to make sure it does happen. But we're ready to go with another 12 episodes in 2025. So looking forward to that. And thanks all. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See y'all next year.
Bye-bye.
Bye.